Hey everybody, this is Christian Government Equals Freedom, brought to you by the Republic of Texas. Um, anyways, either your rights come from God or from government, okay? Christian government equals freedom. There's no other legal system on the planet, and there never has been. Every system of law on the planet is either common law or civil law. Common law rights come from God. Civil law rights come from government. The only way that we can be free is with Christian government, because it's based on the premise that all rights come from God. This is a map that I got, and it basically shows the common law countries versus the civil law countries. Muslim law is just another form of civil law. Customary law is, again, that's civil law. And then if you notice China and Japan, it's kind of like a mixed system. That's all civil too as well. It's all rights come from government. You notice India is kind of mixed, and that's because of bankruptcies and various things. And if you notice Philippines, it's kind of hard to see, but it's right over here where my mouse is. That is common law, and the reason it's common law is because the United States liberated the Philippines in the Second World War. And actually, there's other countries over here that were liberated by the United States, or so-called liberated. Matter of fact, Japan they're showing it as a mixed system. But the only reason it is because I've had friends that have been over to Japan, and the way they describe things, it's very common law. But again, because of bankruptcies, the government goes into civil law. That's exactly how they get you into into civil laws, because of bankruptcies. So even the countries where it's showing common law are going to civil law. It's going that way. If you notice in Canada, Quebec, and in the U.S., Louisiana, they go and they start, in these certain areas to try and to bring it into civil law. So then ultimately, they'll bring it all into civil law, and the way they do it is through the bankruptcies and ignorance on the part of the people, and that's really what happens now in North America, and especially the USA. People are more on top of it, so it's harder for them to do it. They have to pass statutes that basically bring common law, but even statutes, that's all government granted rights, and So it's really civil law, but they're making it look like it's common law. That's what it comes down to. This is the British Commonwealth of Nations. Britain conquered a bunch of countries, and way back when in the 1800s, and so this is all of them. And it doesn't include the United States because we rebelled against them. But United States was part of the British Commonwealth of Nations at one time too. And the two legal systems, common law and civil law, common law is based on precedent, custom, and interpretation. Good judge can interpret laws. Ownership is established by use. Innocent until proven guilty. Contracts tend to be longer and more detailed. Contract performance, except for acts of God. And they're more adversarial, more lawsuits. And most of that's true. The judges, the common law is basically court decisions, and in England, the common law system is based on 800 years of jury trial decisions, and those are court cases. And so that's the sum and essence of common law, and where it comes from is 800 years of jury trial cases. And so civil law is based on written codes and detailed laws, okay? Millions of codes, okay? Why do you think they're making millions of codes in America, Canada? They're making literally millions of codes every day. They pass more. Judges can apply laws, okay? And then judges just make it up as they go along. It's a bought and paid for. It's a clerk. He's bought and paid for. Ownership is established by registration. Guilty and everything is registered nowadays. Vehicles, land, when you unless you do it properly, you basically give it back to the state when you record it with the county recorder's office. Guilty until proven innocent, which is all these kangaroo courts you see nowadays in my other videos, you'll see that. Contracts tend to be shorter. Contract performance as acts of God, which would be include unforeseeable acts. It's less adversarial, less lawsuits, because they don't want those kinds of problems. You don't have any rights that they don't grant. Anyways, this is all coming from UNIDROIT, which is the Uniform Commercial Code. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Japan, Tunisia, China, they're all involved in UNIDROIT. There's 64 countries. The purpose of UNIDROIT is to impose civil law on all countries, okay? UNIDROIT captures the courts. Once rights are granted by governments, easy to enslave people. First, they get people to use the statutory rights, and then they just change the statutes. I mean, that's real simple. That's exactly what they're planning. I mean, that's what the UN is all about. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us, and that's taken from the causes and necessities for taking up arms, 1775. This is going on from at least that long, is what precipitated the War of Independence. Many countries are under the civil law, still have many freedoms. The parliamentary system is easily controlled by the New World Order crowd. When people are truly free in one country, it becomes more difficult to enslave other countries. America has always been viewed as a beacon of freedom. And so if they enslave America, then it's easy to enslave the rest. This is taken from the Declaration of Independence, 1776, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And then we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so this is the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. Okay, the Declaration of Independence is really just a list of grievances. Okay, so what Jefferson was saying is that we have certain rights, and the king has violated those rights, and so a decent respect of mankind requires that we declare what's going on and why we're telling them to take a hike. And so then it's a list of grievances. And so there's phrases that are in the Declaration of Independence that are important because that's all part of the founding documents. Matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence is considered positive law in America. Anyways, and he talks about the laws of nature, nature's God, and we're endowed by our Creator with certain rights. And so then the law of nature was actually taken from a set of books. It's a phrase taken from a set of books called Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. And that was published 1765 to 1769, so over 4 years. I guess Blackstone wrote it over that period of time. I'm not sure the actual date it was published. Anyways, this is section 2, page 41. This law of nature, being coeval with mankind and dictated by God himself, is of course superior in obligation to any other. It is binding over all the globe, in all countries, and at all times. No human laws are of any validity if contrary to this, and such of them as are valid derive all their force, all their authority, immediately from this original. Now you have to understand, William Blackstone was an English jurist. He was equivalent to a justice on the Supreme Court of England at the time. I don't know what the court was called, but it was equivalent to that. And so he was a pretty smart guy. And so when he says that it's binding over all the globe and all countries at all times, and no human laws are of any validity, I mean, he knows what he's talking about. And so anyways, and it goes on. It says, this has been given manifold occasion for the benign interposition of divine providence, which in compassion to the frailty, the imperfection, and the blindness of human reason, hath been pleased at sundry times and in divers manners to discover and enforce its laws by an immediate and direct revelation. The doctrines thus delivered we call the revealed or divine law, and they are to be found only in the Holy Scriptures. These precepts, when revealed, are found upon comparison to be really part of the original law of nature, as they tend in all their consequences to man's felicity. And so, again, so now he's talking about the Scriptures and how it's all the Scriptures, the laws found in the Scriptures, the revelations that are found in the Scriptures are really part of the law of nature. And upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, depend all human laws. That is to say, no human law should be suffered to contradict these. Okay, so the law of nature and the law of revelation, all human laws depend on those two things. Okay, and so that's the important thing that Jefferson was essentially saying. So now this is actually taken from Webster's 1828 Law Dictionary, and under the definition of law, there's several points. Okay, so there's actually we're going to go through some of them, and so it's like 7, 9, 11. We're not going to go through all of them. We're just going to go through some of them. Anyways, a law is which is laid, set, or fixed, a statute, constitution, from Latin it's statuto. And number 1, the point 1, was a rule, particularly an established or permanent rule prescribed by the supreme power of a state to its subjects for regulating their actions, particularly their social actions. Laws are imperative or mandatory, commanding what shall be done, prohibitory, restraining from what is to be forborne, or permissive, declaring what may be done without incurring a penalty. The laws which enjoin the duties of piety and morality are prescribed by God and found in the Scriptures. A law is a benefice acting by rule. Okay, so and notice in this paragraph 1 it says without incurring a penalty. We're going to talk a little bit about penalties later on in this presentation. This is all taken from Webster's 1828 dictionary, which Webster, that's one that in the Republic of Texas, the Constitution was written based on that. Anyways, municipal law is a rule of civil conduct prescribed by the supreme power of a state, commanding what its subjects are to do and prohibiting what they are to forbear, a statute. And so municipal law is a statute. Okay, municipal or civil laws are established by the decrees, edicts, or ordinances of absolute princes, as emperors and kings, or by formal acts of the legislatures of free states. Law, therefore, is sometimes equivalent to decree, edict, or ordinance. Okay, so again, municipal law is different from regular law, and so it's for their subjects. And so again, who is a subject of the state? Not everybody is a subject of the state. Okay, and so municipal law is for subjects. And it goes on in paragraph 3. It talks about the law of nature as a rule of conduct arising out of the natural relations of human beings, established by the Creator and existing prior to any positive precept. Thus, it is a law of nature that one man should not injure another, and murder and fraud would be crimes, independent of any prohibition from a supreme power. Okay, so in other words, the law of nature has always been here, and it will always be here, and there's nothing the government can say about it. And so the point being is that municipal laws created by statutes, the law of nature, which is the Scriptures as well, is all found. It was here before the government was here, and it will be here when it goes away. The law of nations, the rules that regulate the mutual intercourse of nations or states. These rules depend on natural law or the principles of justice which spring from the social state, or they are founded on customs, compacts, treaties, leagues, agreements between independent communities. In other words, yeah, there's two basic parts of international law. One of it's treaties, but another part of it is basically canon law. It comes from the Roman cult. By the law of nations, we are to understand that the Code of Public Instruction, which defines the rights and prescribes the duties of nations in their intercourse with each other. And I've got a video on international law that I published recently, or that's going to get published, that basically talks about how the international law started with the Roman cult. Anyways, ecclesiastical law is a rule of action prescribed for the government of a church, otherwise called canon law. Okay, and that's actually parts of international law fall under that. The treaties obviously don't, but there's certain things that the Roman cult has come out and said about what the nations can do with each other, and that's part of international law. Anyways, and the Roman cult is the first one that come out with anything about that too. Anyways, and then there's the unwritten or common law, A rule of action which derives its authority from long usage or established custom which has been immemorially received and recognized by judicial tribunals. As this law can be traced to no positive statutes, its rules or principles are to be found only in the records of courts and in the reports of judicial decisions. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other, and that's John Adams. All acts of the legislature apparently contrary to natural rights and justice are in our law and must be in the nature of things considered as void. The laws of nature are the laws of God, whose authority can be superseded by no power on earth. A legislature must not obstruct our obedience to him, from whose punishments they cannot protect us. All human constitutions which contradict his laws, God's laws, we are in conscience bound to disobey. And that's in 1772, Robin versus Hardaway at 1 Jefferson 109. Every citizen and freeman is endowed with certain rights and privileges to enjoy which no written law or statute is required. These are fundamental or natural rights recognized among all free people. U.S. versus Morris. As a general rule, men have the natural right to do anything which their inclinations may suggest, if it be not evil in itself and in no way impairs the rights of others. And that's Henry Newman. When you become entitled to exercise the right of voting for public officers, let it be impressed on your mind that God commands you to choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of our government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, the government will soon be corrupted. Laws will be made not for the public good so much as for selfish or local purposes. Corrupt or incompetent men will be appointed to execute the laws, and the public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men, and the rights of the citizen will be violated or disregarded. If our government fails to secure public prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglect the divine commands and elect bad men to make and administer the laws. And that's Noah Webster. He's the guy that wrote the dictionary. American patriot and scholar, author of the first dictionary, the American English Usage, 1806, and the author of the 1828 edition of the dictionary that bears his name. And we took the definition of law, or some of it, out of as part of this presentation. And now a little diversion. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button, and don't forget to like the video if you like it, and don't forget to subscribe so that you're notified when there's a new upload. And there's our channel. Everything is an illusion. That picture there is taken from the movie The Matrix, and the arrow is pointing at the bell, and you click on that bell and a pop-up will come up and it'll ask you if you want to subscribe. Actually, it'll ask you if you want to be notified about updates, and the answer is yes. That's assuming that you want to be notified when there's a new video that comes out. Our rights come from God, not from government. The governments are but trustees acting under derived authority and have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. But the people, as the original fountain, might take away what they have delegated and entrust to whom they please. The sovereignty in every state resides in the people of the state, and they may alter and change their form of government at their own pleasure. Our rights come from God, not from government. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. While sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts. And that's Yickwo versus Hopkins. It's the U.S. Supreme Court. All authority belongs to the people. Thomas Jefferson. Our rights come from God, not from government, and because it brings into action and enforces this great and glorious principle that the people are the sovereign of this country, and consequently that fellow citizens and joint sovereigns cannot be degraded by appearing with each other in their own courts to have their controversies determined. And that's Chisholm versus Georgia. Now, some people have asked me questions about this. Well, what that essentially means, if you think about it, is that our courts, that judge in there has an oath of office to protect our rights. And so for us to go in there and beg him forgiveness or plead or do anything is degrading, okay? our court is a common law jury of our peers. Okay, we have no business being in their courts. Okay, that's our court, really, it is. But we have no business going into those courts. Our court is a jury of our peers, and so we're not subject to those laws. All rights come from God, not from government. A sovereign is exempt from suit not because of any formal conception or obsolete theory, but on the logical and practical ground that there can be no legal right as against the authority which makes the law on which the right depends. And so, remember, it said that we delegate authority. And so if we delegated authority to create this court, then how can the court come back to us and say, well, we're going to put you in jail? Okay, they can't do that. Okay, that's perjury of oath. Okay, and it's perjury of oath. It's a treason to the Constitution for them to even talk to us, truly. And I know people that have gone into court, and the judge, he'd say, yeah, I'm, whoever, and the judge would say, okay, that's fine, and you don't need to say anything, and the judge would start talking to the prosecutor, and the case would go away. That's exactly what should happen. If the judge is honoring his oath of office, that's exactly what should happen. And but so many times they want to get that royalty. They want to assault you. They're nothing but a bunch of pirates. Don't get me going. The judicial power is the power to hear those matters which affect life, liberty, or property of citizens of the state. And the very meaning of sovereignty is that the decree of the sovereign makes law. That's true. We, the people, when we convene our juries, and they cannot override that. They cannot appeal that. It's not subject to appeal. And we make law. Even the juries that sit in these de facto courts make law. They do it every day. It's called jury nullification. They can sit there and say, well, this is a bad law, so we think that we're just going to find him not guilty, regardless of whether he is actually guilty according to the law or not. We're just going to find him not guilty. And this is a stupid law. This guy shouldn't even be here on trial, so we're just going to find him not guilty. And the jury has that power. And it's not appealable either. Court, the person in suit of the sovereign, the place where the sovereign sojourns with his legal retinue, wherever that may be. Okay? And history is clear that the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were adopted to secure certain common law rights of the people against invasion by the federal government. It affirms rights. The first 10 amendments affirms rights that already existed. Okay? They're natural rights. They're found in the Bible, and they've been here from the beginning of time, and they'll be here after the government goes away. Okay? They're natural rights. They've always been here, and there's more than just the first 10 amendments, too. There's unlimited rights. Under natural law, which is law of the land, our rights are unlimited. We have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to due process, right to property, right to face accuser, right to trial by jury, right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, right to counsel of our choice. The individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He's entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no duty to the state or to his neighbors to divulge his business or to open his doors to an investigation, so far as it may tend to incriminate him. He owes no such duty to the state, since he receives nothing therefrom beyond the protection of his life, liberty, and property. His rights are such as existed by the law of the land, long antecedent to the organization of the state, and can only be taken from him by due process of law and in accordance with the Constitution. Among his rights are a refusal to incriminate himself and the immunity of himself and his property from arrest or seizure except under a judicial power warrant, which is a warrant of the law. That's a real warrant, not these fraudulent, fictitious things they issue nowadays. He does nothing to the public. He owes nothing to the public so long as he does not trespass upon their rights. And that's, again, U.S. Supreme Court, Hale versus Henkel. So natural law is the law of the land, and it was here before the government was here. It has always been here, and it will be here after the government goes away. This is Carlisle versus United States, another Supreme Court case. The rights of sovereignty extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. They extend to all strangers resident therein, not only to those who are naturalized and to those who are domiciled therein, having taken up their abode with the intention of permanent residence, but also to those whose residence is transitory. All strangers are under the protection of the sovereign while they are within his territory and owe a temporary allegiance in return for that protection. So what they're talking about here is two classes of citizens, okay? And there's always been two classes of citizens, strangers and those born in the land. And we're going to talk a little bit about those. But right now we'll talk about this one, McConnell versus Wilcox, which is an Illinois court case, 1837. The land patent is the minument of title, such title being absolute in its nature, making the sovereigns absolute freeholders on their lands, okay? So each of us individually are sovereigns, okay? That's we the people created the Constitution. We the people created the government. Finally, the patent is the only evidence of legal fee simple title. So the point is that the courts call us individually sovereigns. You know, there's a lot of controversy about that nowadays, but that's because of Satanists in the White House. And again, we the people have to stand up and assert our rights. That's really what it comes down to. This is Exodus 22:20. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, so think about it. That's how the children of Israel were enslaved. They were strangers, okay? And thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt. That's how they enslaved them, is they were strangers, okay? But a stranger that dwelleth with you shall be as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So what's happening now is it's a biblical command that we treat strangers, that's aliens, okay, like we treat ourselves. And what they do, quite frankly, is not happening. Now, some of them are criminals, and they need to be taken care of, obviously. But many of them are actually second-class citizens because and I've got videos about that, and we won't talk about that here. So we need to repent on that part. I can tell you right now. America was founded by tough hellraisers, rugged citizens who evaded taxes, spoke strongly against tyranny, grew tobacco, brewed beer and spirits, smuggled weapons, and it will be saved only by those same types of citizens. And ain't that the truth? But Jesus, what would you do about immigration? Remember, even heaven has a wall, a gate, and there's extreme vetting to get in, and that's true. And so that's why I always say that building a wall is a great idea. I think Trump is right on the money. But this video is about Texas, not Trump or the United States. No common law equals statutory rights, and the question is that satanic government? Okay, if you have no common law, is that satanic? And I believe it is. If our rights have to be defined by a statute, then our rights come from government. If crimes have to be defined by statutes, then there are no real crimes. That sounds like satanic government. If our rights are defined by a statute, we're exchanging God-given rights for statutory privileges. All United Nations treaties, covenants, statutes, and agreements contain government-granted rights. Government-granted rights and privileges are Roman law. This is all coming from the Roman cult, is where it's coming from. Roman law, civil law, and Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of law action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law. Remember, municipal law is for subjects, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. Black's Law Dictionary, revised 4th edition. Municipal laws for subjects. Okay, this is all Roman law. And then in Canada, and this is a little diversion, but in Canada, the Constitution of Canada talks about the supremacy of God. Communists in Canada have been trying to get God removed from the Constitution. Communists in Canada have been trying to convert God-given rights into government-granted rights, and they're actually doing it. In Canada, it's definitely happening. No common law crimes in the United States. Is that satanic government? There are no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. And that's the U.S. Supreme Court in numerous cases. And no common law crimes in Texas. Is that satanic government? Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. the legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Okay, so again, that's all municipal law. That's law for subjects. Okay, are you a subject or not? Okay, do we have Christian government or do we have something else? And is that something else satanic? You know, really, my attitude is if it's not Christian, then it's satanic by definition. No common law crimes. Is that satanic government? Everything is an admiralty. Okay? A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in the admiralty, but an appeal. And that's taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, under the definition of admiralty. But it's citing Book 4 on the Blackstone's, on Coke's Institutes and the Laws of England, which was written in the 1500s. Appeals, why do they call it a court of appeals? It's because it's admiralty, okay? And they're always court of appeals. This is the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. This is taken from the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of law martial. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. That's military dictatorship, folks. That's exactly, martial law is military dictatorship. It can be a benevolent dictatorship, but it's still military dictatorship, and the next guy comes along may not be so benevolent, just like the Satanist Obama that was in there was not, and now we got one that's a Christian, and so he might be. And so, again, do we want Christian government or not? And this is actually taken from non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. And he's explaining the same thing in a little bit different way. And what he says is, in the meantime, civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is a law, then it follows its own course rather than following the common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. And that's essentially what they said in the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms. And that's why under martial law, equity is satanic. The judge will sit there and say to you, he says, I can do anything I want in this courtroom. And he's right, because it's all under martial law. And so then equity just goes right out the window. And you can literally do anything you want under equity. And this is more stuff taken. This is the list of grievances taken out of the Declaration of Independence for abolishing the free system of English laws in the neighboring provinces, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. That's military dictatorship, folks. As he has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us for protecting them by a mock trial. Okay, this is all talking about martial law. And and this is another cite from that by that book, Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. Congress, claiming its martial law power to declare war, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, imposed martial law in the United States and never discontinued it. The result was an extension of military and municipal jurisdiction of Congress, but where's the evidence of this? Look at the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the legal tender laws, the 14th Amendment, etc., etc., etc. The 14th Amendment is an extension of the national military powers presently used in a municipal character and enforced by municipal laws, stretch far beyond their original limitations and enforced by Article 1 tribunals, okay? And that's, again, that non-ratification of the 14th Amendment. Destroy the family and you destroy the country. Okay, and this is Lenin said that. He was a psychopath, quite frankly. Non-Christian government. Is that satanic government? I think it is. The abuse of greatness is when it disjoins remorse from power, and that's Shakespeare said that, and he's talking about psychopaths. And this is Hitler. All propaganda has to be popular and has to accommodate itself to the comprehension of the least intelligent of those whom it seeks to reach. And that's Hitler, satanic government, okay? The people will believe what the media tells them to believe, and that's Orwell. Satanic government equals lies. Okay, hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year to control the public mind. Okay, satanic government equals lies. And remember, we talked about how the people are sovereign. Well, this is a FBA law enforcement bulletin, and again, they're attacking anybody that thinks they have any rights. And sovereign citizens, a growing domestic threat to law enforcement. Okay, well, yeah, it probably is. Okay, that's people saying, hey, we've had enough of this. And so if they're Satanists, then yeah, it's going to be a threat. If they're peace officers, and I've got a video about peace officers versus law enforcement officers and the differences. If they're peace officers, then they have nothing to fear. Matter of fact, we the people have a duty to come to their aid, to the aid of peace officers, and so they can expect us to come to their aid, and we will. But as far as these Satanist order follower law enforcement officers, they're not going to do too well, I can tell you right now. Matter of fact, when the Soviet Union collapsed, is because what happened is the law enforcement officers saw the evil to what they were doing, and they refused to follow orders. Okay, so then they became peace officers, and that's when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so don't tread on me. Move over, jihadists. Sovereign citizens seems America's top terrorist threat. Well, they're terrorists to tyrants. Yeah, they are. Terrorists to tyrants, that's for sure. Are these Satanist leaders? How could you tell when Obama was lying? His lips were moving. He's a Satanist. How could you tell when Clinton was lying? His lips were moving. That means he's a Satanist. Bush's were not much better. Both parties are full of Satanists, or a large percentage. And here's another little thing that's important, is a shock report, FBI arresting far more Americans targeting Muslims than Muslims targeting Americans. And that is, the thing is as Christians, Christian government, we have to respect other people's rights to believe what they choose to believe. And that's one of the fundamental principles. That's why the First Amendment, the Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And so, because we're Christians, we allow other people to have their own beliefs. That's the first article in Amendment, Article 1 in Amendment. Denying somebody their beliefs and then assaulting them because of that is a denial of due process. You're denying that, but it's also an assault. We should defend everyone's rights to hold their own beliefs. We should defend everyone's rights to free speech. I mean, if we damage anyone, we damage ourselves. If we damage the neighbor's right to free speech, if we damage his right to hold property, then we damage our own right at the same time. We have to understand that. We're all connected. We damage someone else's rights, get damaged, we ourselves get damaged too. We cannot allow these people to get us diverted off of what's going on. Leaders tried, and there's leaders who have tried to make a difference. Reagan was better than most, and they tried to murder him. Kennedy was murdered 7 days after he stated that he had to notify the people about a plot to enslave every man, woman, and child. I would call Kennedy a good and honorable man, but he was by no means perfect. None of us are. There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. And that was 7 days before he was murdered. JFK exposes ruthless conspiracy, the president, and the free press. We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. And so Kennedy fully understood what was going on, and he tried to put a stop to it, and they murdered him. After Kennedy's murder, Johnson engaged in warfare against what he considered his political enemies, hippies and blacks on America's streets, with his war on drugs. Johnson also did what is known as the Johnson Amendment to the tax code in an effort to muzzle the churches, who were also his political enemies. And actually, Trump is talking about getting rid of that, and I hope he does. But quite frankly, I'm skeptical as to whether it'll make a difference, because all these churches, that's been in place for 60 years. And so they're all trained. George H.W. Bush continued the war on drugs and also engaged in the war on crime. Clinton continued with the war on drugs and the war on crime. George Bush Jr. continued the war on drugs, the war on crime, and started the war on terror. Again, and then former Nixon aide admits the war on drugs was a big lie. It was never about drugs. And this is actually taken from Natural Blaze. Anyways, in an interview conducted by Harper's Dan Baum nearly 22 years ago, former Nixon domestic policy chief John Ehrlichman admitted that many have known ever since the beginning, that the Nixon administration's war on drugs was a giant lie. And Ehrlichman doesn't mince words when he discusses the war on drugs. It is not inference suggesting that the justification given for the war on drugs was a lie. In fact, Ehrlichman even states that the policy was in order to attack political rivals and alleged threats to the Nixon administration like blacks and hippies. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people, Ehrlichman said. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, Ehrlichman said. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the news. And that's exactly what they did. Oh, there it is. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And of course the war on drugs and the ensuing police and incarceration states that followed had a much larger purpose than merely helping Nixon fight back against potential political threats. And indeed, most drugs were already illegal by Nixon's election. And so hiding and preventing those, the knowledge of positive effects of those substances. For instance, Reagan, especially Clinton, were under no threat from the populations mentioned by Ehrlichman, but they nevertheless sent the drug war and the natural results of it listed above into overdrive. Okay, so again, that's all their agenda. Obama engaged in warfare on his political enemies, Christians, preppers, and patriots with his war on terror. See the war on terror as a war on you video. The Baal priests in the Roman cult courts made out like bandits, like the bandits they are. Because the Johnson Amendment, all 501c3 tax-exempt organizations can't say anything negative about the government, and Trump is talking about repealing that. But again, what's stopping the next guy from putting it back in there, number one? And number two, all these churches are already trained, okay? It's been in place for 60 years. I'm skeptical as to whether it'll make any difference. It is interesting to note that nobody tried to kill Johnson, Nixon, Carter, Ford, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Clinton, or Obama. Isn't that interesting? They only tried to kill the good guys. Didn't Obama say on numerous occasions that America does not have Christian government? He certainly did. Is Mark Passio right when he says that a majority of the people of this country are practicing Satanists? I think he is. Most so-called Christian churches are effectively muzzled by the Johnson Amendment, and because they cannot speak the truth, or what they view to be the truth, the best they can do is speak half-truths and falsehoods, which may mean they're actually practicing Satanists, as Mark Passio said. I know thy works and tribulation. I know the blasphemy of them that say they're Jews or Christians, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, and that's Revelations 2 and 9. So are you tired of the kangaroo courts? Are you tired of the extortion they call taxes? Are you tired of schools that don't teach? Are you tired of corrupt bureaucrats? Are you tired of revenue officers masquerading as peace officers? Are you tired of victimless crimes? Are you tired of the police state? Are you tired of not really owning your land? Are you tired of the Satanism that seems to be everywhere? Are you tired of being compelled to work for the government by being compelled to provide a government employee's social security number, even when you're not really working for the government? The Republic of Texas is alive and well and here to offer you a peaceful alternative to the current tyranny being imposed by the Roman cult-owned and operated District of Columbia. To find like-minded people who are interested in good government, freedom, and independence, go to www.thetexasrepublic.com. To find out how you can participate in your lawful Christian government, go to www.therepublicoftexas.com. It appears that the current Trump administration may be a Christian government, but that's yet to be seen. I hope so. I have high hopes, and I believe that it is. But again, at the end of the day, we'll see. You know, that's all you can do. Either your rights come from God or from government. The only way we can be free is with Christian government, because it's based on the premise that all rights come from God. Rights that come from government are Roman law and will result in your slavery. Roman law is satanic. Roman law has nothing to do with freedom and has everything to do with slavery. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, and check out our Republic of Texas website, and have a really great day.